Welcome to Mountain Home Stories. Today we are opening a new page in our reading practice with The King of the Golden River, a classic tale by John Ruskin, presented in a specially abridged form for English language learners. Let's begin our journey. Chapter 1: The Three Brothers and the Strange Visitor. Once upon a time, in a mountainous country, there was a beautiful valley called Treasure Valley. It was surrounded by high, snowy mountains. Even when other parts of the land suffered from terrible droughts and had no food, Treasure Valley always stayed green and rich. Corn grew tall, apple trees bent with the weight of fruit, and honey was abundant. The valley belonged to three brothers, Hans, Schwartz, and Gluck. Hans and Schwartz, the two older brothers, were very cruel and selfish men. They were tall, ugly, and had hard hearts. They worked their farm workers without paying them, cheated their customers, and never gave a single penny to the poor. People called them the Black Brothers. The youngest brother, Gluck, was completely different. He was 12 years old, kind-hearted, and very gentle. He did all the hard work in the kitchen and around the house, while his brothers spent their money in the local tavern. One cold, rainy winter evening, the two older brothers went out, leaving Gluck to watch the roast meat in the kitchen. They told him not to let anyone in or they would beat him. As Gluck sat by the warm fire, he heard a soft knock at the door. He opened the window to look outside. There stood a very small, strange old man. The man wore an enormous pointed hat, a long cloak that dragged in the mud, and had a very long nose. He was shivering from the freezing rain. "Please, my boy," said the little man, "let me come in and warm myself by your fire. I am wet and freezing." Gluck felt sorry for him. "I want to help you, sir," Gluck said nervously, "but my brothers will beat me if they find you here." "I will only stay for a few minutes," begged the old man. Gluck opened the door. The old man sat close to the fire, and his wet clothes created a large puddle on the floor. Gluck even cut a small piece of the roast meat to give to the hungry visitor. Suddenly, the door flew open. Hans and Schwartz walked into the room. They were furious when they saw the guest. "Who is this old beggar?" shouted Hans, grabbing a heavy stick. "Get out of our house!" screamed Schwartz, lifting his fist to strike the old man. The strange little man moved away quickly, and as he did, a mysterious gust of wind filled the room. The stick and fist missed him completely. "I am leaving," said the old man, his eyes flashing in the dark. "But I will return tonight at midnight. Because of your cruelty, this is the last time I will ever sit by your fire." He walked out into the storm. The older brothers laughed, ate the rest of the meat, and went to bed, warning Gluck to clean up the mess. Chapter 2: The Revenge of the Southwest Wind. At midnight, a terrifying storm woke the brothers. The roof of the house shook, and the sound of rushing wind was deafening. The door burst open, and a giant wave of muddy water flooded into the house. In the middle of the kitchen, floating on a large block of wood, sat the strange visitor from earlier. He was no longer wet. Instead, he looked powerful and majestic. "I am the Southwest Wind," the little man shouted above the noise of the storm. "I have broken your walls, destroyed your crops, and flooded your fields. You will get no more help from me. Tomorrow I'll leave Treasure Valley forever." When the sun rose the next morning, the brothers looked out of their window. They were shocked and horrified. Treasure Valley was completely ruined. The green grass was gone, buried under thick grey sand and heavy mud. The beautiful fruit trees were broken and the corn was washed away. The valley was now a dry, dead desert. Nothing could grow there anymore. Hans and Schwartz had no more wealth. They had spent all their money and they could no longer farm. They decided to leave the valley and move to the nearby city. They took all the gold and silver items left in their ruined house and became goldsmiths. However, they were still dishonest. They mixed cheap metals with real gold to cheat people, but customers quickly discovered their lies. Soon they were poor again. The only valuable thing they had left was a beautiful golden mug that belonged to young Gluck. It had been given to him by his grandfather. The mug was made of pure gold, and a delicate face of a golden dwarf with a long beard was carved into the front of it. Gluck loved this mug very much and did not want to lose it. One evening, Hans and Schwartz wanted money to buy drink at the tavern. They snatched the mug from Gluck and threw it into a hot melting pot over the furnace. They ordered Gluck to watch the fire and melt the gold. Then they walked out. Gluck stood by the furnace, crying softly as he watched his favorite golden mug melt into liquid. Chapter 3: The King of the Golden River. As the gold melted, Gluck walked over to the window to look at the mountains. The sun was setting, and its bright red rays lit up a magnificent waterfall that poured down the highest peak. The water looked like a river of liquid gold. "It would be wonderful if that water was real gold," Gluck whispered to himself. "Then we would not be poor and miserable." "No, it would not be wonderful at all, my boy," a sharp, clear voice replied from behind him. Gluck spun around in surprise. The kitchen was empty, but the voice came from inside the hot melting pot. Gluck ran to the furnace and looked inside. The liquid gold was boiling rapidly. Suddenly, a tiny, glowing golden man stepped out of the pot and stood on the brick ledge. He was only a foot tall, dressed in a sparkling golden coat, and had the exact same face as the dwarf on Gluck's favorite mug. "I am the king of the Golden River," the little dwarf announced proudly. "Your cruel brothers melted my physical form, but they have actually set me free. Because you are a kind and good boy, Gluck, I will tell you a powerful secret." The king pointed out the window toward the shining waterfall. "Do you see that river? If anyone climbs to the very top of the mountain and pours 3 drops of holy water into the stream, the river will turn into real gold for that person." Before Gluck could ask any questions, the golden dwarf jumped back into the furnace and vanished in a bright flash of light. The pot was completely empty. Not a single drop of gold was left. When Hans and Schwartz returned home and found out that the gold was gone, they were enraged. They beat poor Gluck until their arms were tired. But when Gluck told them the secret of the Golden River, the two brothers stopped fighting. They stared at each other with greedy eyes. They wanted that river of gold for themselves. Chapter 4: The Journey of the Cruel Brothers. The next morning, Hans and Schwartz argued about who should go first. Hans was stronger, so he beat Schwartz and claimed the first chance. He went to a local priest and demanded holy water. But the priest refused because Hans was a bad man. So Hans simply stole a bottle of holy water from the church altar and started his journey up the mountain. The mountain climb was steep, dangerous, and exhausting. The sun beat down fiercely and the air was dry and hot. Hans became terribly thirsty. He sat down to take a drink from his water bottle. As he lifted the bottle to his mouth, he heard a weak cry. He looked down and saw a small, dying dog on the path. The dog was panting for water. "Get away, you useless animal!" Hans shouted. He kicked the dog aside and drank his water, refusing to share a single drop. As he walked away, a dark shadow seemed to fall over the mountain scenery. Hans climbed higher. The path became rougher and the heat grew worse. An hour later, he saw a beautiful little child lying on the rocks. The child's lips were blue with thirst, and it held out its tiny hands, begging for a drink. "I don't have enough water for beggars," Hans snarled, stepping right over the crying child. As he did, the bright blue sky turned a strange dark grey color. Finally, Hans reached the top of the mountain. He stood right next to the roaring waterfall. He felt a sudden shiver of fear, but his greed was too strong. He took out the stolen bottle and threw the water into the rushing stream. Instantly, the waterfall stopped shining like gold. A loud roar of thunder rolled through the valley, and the earth shook. The water curled over Hans, and in a single second, his body hardened and turned into a cold black stone. Back at home, Hans did not return. Schwartz decided to try his luck. He bought water from a dishonest person who sold it cheaply, so the water was not truly holy. Schwartz climbed the same difficult path. Like his brother, Schwartz ignored the dying dog. Further up, he passed a fair-haired child crying for water, but he pushed the child away. Near the summit, he saw an old man lying on the rocks, gasping for breath and begging for a drink. Schwartz laughed and drank the water himself. When Schwartz reached the waterfall, the sky was pitch black and lightning flashed around him. He threw his water into the river. The water rose up like a giant wave, grabbed him, and Schwartz was instantly turned into a second black stone right next to his brother. Chapter 5: Kind Gluck and the Restored Valley. When both brothers failed to return, young Gluck decided to climb the mountain himself. He went to a good priest who kindly gave him a bottle of true holy water and blessed him on his journey. The climb was very hard for the young boy. After walking for hours, Gluck was exhausted and his throat felt like fire. He sat down to rest and took out his water bottle. Just then, he saw an old man crawling down the rocks, looking weak and pale. "My boy," the old man whispered, "I'm dying of thirst. Please give me some water." Gluck saw how close to death the man was. He handed over the bottle. "Drink as much as you need, sir," Gluck said gently. The old man drank deeply, thanked the boy, and felt instantly stronger. As Gluck took the bottle back, he noticed that the path ahead suddenly looked easier and a cool, refreshing breeze began to blow. Gluck climbed further until he saw a small child lying by the path, crying in pain from the heat. Gluck hesitated for a moment, looking at his small amount of water, but he could not leave a child to suffer. He knelt down and poured the cool water into the child's mouth. The child stood up, smiled beautifully, and disappeared into the bright air. Around Gluck, wonderful red and purple flowers suddenly began to bloom on the barren rocks, and the sound of sweet birds filled the mountains. Finally, Gluck reached the top. He had only a few drops of water left in his bottle. Right before the waterfall, he found the small panting dog that his brothers had kicked. The poor dog was too weak to move. Gluck looked at his bottle. "If I give this away, I will have nothing left for the river," he thought. But then he looked into the dog's sad eyes. "I cannot let you die," Gluck said. He poured the very last drops of water into the dog's tongue. The dog instantly stood up and began to change shape. Its fur turned to pure gold, and it grew into the tiny, familiar figure of the king of the Golden River. "Well done, Gluck," said the king with a bright, warm smile. "You have passed the test. The water you gave to others was the truest holy water because it was given with love and kindness." The king bent down and picked a small glowing flower that was growing near the water. He shook 3 drops of dew from the flower into Gluck's empty bottle. "Pour this into the river," the king commanded. "Then walk down into Treasure Valley." Gluck took the bottle, walked to the edge of the roaring waterfall, and poured the 3 drops inside. The river did not turn into gold. Instead, the water divided and began to flow down a new path, straight into the dry, dead valley below. The king of the Golden River vanished into the mist. Gluck walked back down the mountain, feeling confused. But when he reached Treasure Valley, he cried out with joy. The fresh mountain water had flooded the dry sand and mud. Green grass was rapidly spreading across the earth. Flowers were blooming and new trees were shooting up from the ground. The valley was alive, beautiful, and wealthy once again. Gluck lived in the beautiful valley for the rest of his life. He was always kind to the poor, shared his food with the hungry, and had plenty of everything. As for the 2 selfish older brothers, they remained at the top of the mountain as 2 cold black stones, and people still call them the Black Stones to this day. And so, Gluck lived happily in the beautiful green valley, always sharing what he had with those in need. What do you think was Gluck's real secret weapon? Was it magic? Or was it the power of a kind heart? Leave your guess in the comments below. If you enjoyed practicing your English reading with me today, please like this video, share it with a friend who is learning English, and subscribe to Mountain Home Stories for more peaceful reading journeys. Thank you for reading with me, and I will see you in our next story. Until then, may your own journey be peaceful and your path always clear.